Hey,
Hey, Alysson, nice to finally
Dr. Carol.
virtually meet you, man. I hope you're doing fine.
Yeah. Daniel, it's Daniel or Daniel?
In Spanish, in Mexico, it would be Daniel. When somebody
All
from
right.
the US or Canada or whatever
All right.
says my
Pretty
name,
similar
it's
to
Daniel.
Portuguese. So I will tell Daniel, okay?
As you wish, my man. That's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you because I think this is the first time that I actually hear your voice. How do I pronounce your name, man? I don't want to mess up this.
All right. It's Alysson. It's pretty
Alysson.
simple.
And,
Alysson. Yes.
and
But if you use like the American accent, it would be something like Allison. But
yeah,
well, actually, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I really don't care because I always make some fun with my mom. I told her, hey mom, I think you can have better names for me, like easier for people saying my name because Alison, I think it's pretty difficult, especially in US at the time that I spend in US. So sometimes I go to delivery and I say, okay, my name is Alex. That's it. Because for some people it's pretty difficult to understand. Like, okay, it's Alison.
yeah. Because you have to say it in Portuguese. And your last name, is it Enes?
Enes,
Or in it?
yes, Alison
All
Enes,
right.
yes.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to get it straight from the man himself. So anyway, man, I'm more than thrilled to have you. I'm really excited about this conversation because well, for me, I'm really sure for a lot of people, your last name, your research has been really impactful, I dare say. And I'm
Appreciate that.
referring to the infamous now 52 set studies, 52 set study. But
Yeah.
it's not just that one that I wanted to briefly comment further on the conversation.
Hmm.
I really wanted to talk to you because recently, fairly recently, I had a discussion with Eduardo de Souza, which I know your colleagues, you know each other. And man,
Yeah.
I have to say, he gave me a lot of insight into what you guys actually do in a research lab that we do not get to see, that we really do not
Hmm.
acknowledge. And I think that's one of the keys to actually understand some of the research, why it's done like it's done, why the results are what they seem, and a lot of things that I want to talk to you. So anyway, to kickstart the conversation, Alison, I wanted to ask about your background. What's your interested in research, and particularly the
Hmm.
spicy side of research, resistance training research, that is not only volume but also warming up, because I think can get a little people can get a lot of people like this when you talk about this
Oh my
particular
God.
subject.
Yeah. To be honest, after the infamous 52 set paper, I was like, okay, I need to be prepared for people on social media because sometimes you just spend your time in the lab just working, and then yeah, your paper like gets published, and then like, oh my God, what's happening here? Why people are hating us? Like, we are just curious. We just have questions, and we run studies to like, okay, let's see what happens. And a lot of people, and especially after the 52 set paper, but now with the warm up paper again, I was like, oh my God, bro, it's just a simple question. It's just like we because we are looking for some comments like, oh, but what about injury risk? This study is useless. And it's hard for us to read like, oh, this is useless because okay, you spend your whole time, your whole life in the lab for some random guy on Instagram say, oh, this study is useless. So it's pretty hard for me, especially after the 52 set paper. But now I getting more used to it. I talk a lot with Edu about it. Edu, I mean, Dr. De Souza. So I talk a lot with him about this, and it's pretty hard for me, especially after the 52 set paper, to understand like, okay, it doesn't matter what is the quality of study, what is the study that we're gonna run. People on social media, they hate the study just because they are okay, they need to hate something. But all right, after this quick resenha is a word in Portuguese we say is hang out, like we are just talking. So after this little resenha, it's such a pleasure to be here. I have been following your work for a while, so thank you so much for having me here. As I told you, I'm very low profile guy. I just spend my hours in the lab and that's it, just working. And uh, nowadays my interest in research is like to understand how the manipulations and resistance training variables gonna affect the body composition, especially muscle hypertrophy. So currently, I start to study this subject with my mentor, Professor Tastu Souza Jr. In during my undergrad in 2017. So it will be like almost 10 years when I started this. And since then, I just keep like, okay, every time we're gonna run a study, I finish the experimental design like with more doubts and like, okay, we need to run other studies to address our research question here. For example, we run a within subject study. It's a pretty simple study, but we run as an undergrad thesis of a good friend of mine. Her name is Anna, and we compare it like increasing the volume every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, because when we were running and also designing the volume studies, we were like, okay, we're gonna increase the volume every 2 weeks, but
Yeah.
why? What's happening if I increase every four, every six, every eight? Of course, in research, it's pretty hard to keep the participant for a while, like 32 weeks or more, 16 weeks, whatever. So it's pretty hard sometimes to run studies that gonna fit like the people on social media claims, like, oh, but 8 week study is useless. No, because when you are doing a programming, for example, you generally adjust your training based on short term, like, oh, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. So the studies, they provide just snapshots of this period, like, hey, if you increase the volume within this time frame, that's probably gonna happen, so that's the point with running studies with 8, 12 weeks, because also it's pretty hard to keep the participant in the lab. Sometimes some participants, not all of them, but some participants, they finish the study and like, oh my god, now I can back to my usually training routine. So it's pretty hard for this point, but it is what it is. We need to deal with Instagram comments.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of things that come to mind that I want to follow up. And the first one, actually, reseña, it's the same in Spanish. We
Oh,
say,
nice, nice,
yeah,
nice to
yes,
know,
yeah,
nice to know.
straight up the same. And one of the questions, or at least comments that I wanted to throw at you is actually how do you manage controversy on social media? You already alluded to it, because in Dr. De Souza's own words, we live in really strange times, as he mentions. He says. We live in strange times, Daniel, which I
I
completely
talk to
agree.
with him almost every week, like, Doc, we are living very interesting times.
We should make t-shirts from that and the Sousa quoted
Yeah,
quoted below.
definitely.
Because I think people, a random person on Instagram, let's say, can critique your study. Sometimes it's not so random. Sometimes these people have millions of followers. They have a big business, a coaching business, supplement business.
Mhm.
I think it's actually a legitimate problem because it can cause problems with their own clients, with the people that follow them, and throw shadow into what the researchers are actually doing and why are they actually doing it the way they're doing it. For instance, you already mentioned it, but one also that comes to mind, not only the study length, but also the sample size. I can only imagine, I'd like to hear you talk about it, but I can only imagine how difficult it is to get people to actually complete a study and to actually get not only dudes in the study, but also men and women that have actually some real previous experience. Because that's one of the main critiques all the time. Oh, but these people don't train.
Mhm.
Well, how are you going to recruit people that train that have, I don't know, a 1RM squad of, let's say, 500, 600 pounds? Because in your paper warm up, I think that's one of the key points that I want to discuss further on. But first, what are the challenges that you, as a researcher in your own researching world, face that we as science consumers and myself as a, well, at least I try to speak about science openly, that maybe sometimes we don't see, that we don't get to actually take into account before saying, oh, warming up is useless. Oh, we need to go to 52 sets, all those crazy conclusions
Yeah.
that
Uh-huh. All right, Daniel. So, man, such a good question about it because every time when the 52 set paper was published and people like they were hating me and Edu and Tácito on Instagram, in the first weeks I answered them like, hey, because some of them they were like, oh, but I would love to see how this guy's training in the lab. I invited all of them. So hey, this is the address of our lab. I'm waiting you, and you're gonna see.
that's awesome.
Uh, and also, it's pretty hard to get like really well trained population. For example, a lot of people they say, oh, but you need to run studies with like natty physique athletes, for example. But if you go to this guy like, hey, let's participate in the study, most of them they look at you and nah, I'm fine. I don't care for like participating in the study. I just have my own training routine and I don't want to change. Because if I participate in the study, I'm gonna lose muscle. I already listened that a lot of times, and every time I need to explain like, hey, probably you won't lose muscle because, and then we try to like, find a common ground. But and that's why most of the studies with like trained individuals, they are just based on experience because it's easier to recruit participants when you get like 1 year, 2 years of experience. And of course, we try to get like, okay, so for example, in the 52 set paper, we tried to recruit with people squatting at least 1.5 of their body mass, and we get
Right.
it. But some participants, they like they don't squat 1.5, and for these participants we look at, okay, so sadly you don't like fit our criteria, but we have other studies running so you can participate in the other studies. And I think that's the daily basis. That's what people on social media they don't see. um, for example, in the I think past year I saw a podcast of a guy, and this guy he has a PhD. Of course, I don't wanna, I won't mention his name, and he was like criticizing the hypertrophy studies. Like, yeah, I already run on multiple studies in University X, and University Y, and you guys need to see how like boring is training participants in the lab because the participants like they came in and they, okay, let's finish the workout as fast as possible and get out of here. And I was like, okay, but this guy have a lot of followers and the podcast has a huge audience. This guy he's saying something, and don't get me wrong, but I don't remember some studies from him about hypertrophy. And I was like, okay, but what is the point here? Because if you are not helping us, at least don't, because he's a guy with PhD, which like suppose run studies, and he was saying this kind of BS. I was like, bro, why are you saying that? You are not helping us, and then you like people will get this snapshot of the podcast and like, hey, listen, this is a PhD. He already run on multiple studies, and look, all the hypertrophy studies they are BS. So I think the most common thing that people on social media they don't see is the daily basis of like how difficult it is to run a study. I remember one guy, he, oh my God, he commented like really hard things to read. And I replied him like, hey, okay, if this study is useless, is a BS study, run your study. I'm waiting. Like go to a lab, try to recruit participants and try to keep these participants 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, and you see how difficult it is. But you told like something about sample size, and yes, in exercise science we have this elephant in the room about sample size. It's difficult to recruit like 100, 200, 300 participants in one study and keep them for 8, 12 weeks. It's difficult already 30, 50 participants. So the point for maybe the solution for that is multi-center studies. Me and Dr. De Souza, we always talk about it, like multi-center studies, what we can do to like what is the next step in exercise science. And we try to have some ideas, so some thoughts on that, but at this point what we have is just like meta-analysis. The problem is with meta-analysis. The meta-analysis is just like a frame of the literature, and it's dependent of the quality of the studies. And of course, it's pretty easy for me or for any other guy on Instagram say, "Hey, we need more quality studies." But what we can do for better studies, like what we can advance in this point, what it can progress thinking about, like, okay, we need better studies, but how we can, like, I think we need to first look at us, how we can improve our work, our studies. But of course, it's a process, it's a long-term process, and I think, but I'm pretty confident in the next years we will see better quality studies, especially on hypertrophy.
And it's really interesting, all these, let's say, um, burdensome and troublesome times in exercise science, because I think it goes back to the philosophy of science. Because if we talk about exercise science, we're talking about an applied science. And let's say, for instance, deloads comes from an empirical practice that we as rational beings are trying to rationalize, and then gets to get into conflict. And because it's something that some people really, we do not question, like, oh, we need to warm up. Of course, we need to warm up. Well, do we actually have any empirical evidence on that? For instance, something other that comes to mind in the same vein is the deloads that we need to do deloads. To my knowledge, there's only the Max Coleman study a while back, and that's it. That's pretty much it. Other than that, it's the coach's experiences and things that have been done in the past. And I think that's one of the challenges that you as researchers face, that we as consumers don't often even think about it because the philosophy of science is so boring. But I think it's so necessary to be cautious about, because, man, whenever I read studies like this and see the results, well, nowadays, I'm completely certain that if I directly ask you, Allison, do you think warming up is a waste of time? You would say no. Do you think, Allison, do I need to
No,
go to 52 sets? Of course not. But
no.
people tend to think that that's
Yeah.
actually what you guys are saying, because that's what the
Mhm.
data shows. And well, how was the data processed? How does this fit into the research? And like you also mentioned, meta-analysis. All right, they're pretty cool, I'm sure, but it's not the same. I don't know, a meta regression, a meta-analysis, continuous variable, all this stuff that
All this
we
stuff,
need to
yeah.
discuss. But to dig into your paper about warming up, actually, I wanted to ask you about the background. What was your interested in this other spicy subject? And did you come to this study with anything, with any expectations, with, I don't know, maybe some personal questions that you are curious to answer?
Yeah. So the warm-ups study, this study like started past year. I was talking with Dr. Schoenfeld about an acute study to run on his lab with the AMD lab team. Best team in the world. Huge shout out to my friends, Alec, Adam, Tom, Sapupo, all these guys, Fran. They are amazing, and I really miss my period in AMD lab. But I was talking with Dr. Schoenfeld past year, and we were thinking about something practical, like, okay, what we can run as an acute study, and we don't have like too many papers on that. So we and then we figured out, like, okay, warm up is a topic that we need more studies. Of course, every topic in resistance training, we need more studies. We always gonna say that, oh yeah, we need more studies, but especially on warm up, because one of the problems with warm up, uh, I faced that with my master thesis, that was the 52 set paper, because I was running the 1RM protocol, and some participants, they are really strong, and for them it was difficult to like step a lot of the weight. For example, going from 100 kilos to 180. But I was just following the protocol of the 1RMs. I was following the
Yeah.
methods. But I was like, okay, we have something here. But okay, years goes and then time flies and then okay, I just forgot the idea. And then back in past year, I was talking with Dr. Schoenfelder and I talked with him about it. And okay, let's run a study with warm ups. But for this time, we just run a study for something around 10 RM load. And but okay, we have this study with 10 RM loads, but I have a powerlifting coach experience, and that's other problem that I face, especially during the meetings. So, okay, I have like 30 minutes to warm up. How many sets for warm up for my athletes I gonna prescribe? Is like the amount of sets for squats the same amount of for bench press? So I have some practical thoughts about it, and then past year I was like, okay, let's start to run something in this spicy topic about warm-ups. And then we run this study with 10 RM loads. It's just like submaximal exercise. It's not something like 1 RM testing, but we are running a study with 1 RM tests about warm-ups, in specifically in 1 RM tests in squat using Smith machine. It's a another good friend of mine, Professor Danilo, and his undergrad student Artur. They are running a study with 1RMs, and they are in the data collecting now. This period, probably this study gonna end something around October, I guess. But okay, we have this study with 10 RM loads. We have another study with 1 RM. But what we can see in the literature is something like, okay, to have some effect induced by the warm up, we need something around any of the sets of the warm up need to be some of around like 85, 90% of 1 RM to have a priming effect. Even if you work with 10 RM load, you need to have something heavy in the warm up to have an effect. And that's why we designed this study. Like, okay, so let's think about a practical, an ecological approach, like a fitness enthusiast in the gym. How's gonna be the protocol? But of course, it's a problem because every person has his own protocol. Like some participants, and that's a data of the study. The study probably gonna be accepted in the next weeks. We made the reply to reviewers 2 weeks ago, so probably in the next 2 weeks, the study gonna be a published study and not a preprint anymore. And preprint is other problem with Instagram and these people. So okay, what we can do that is more like close to what people do. All right, so let's compare one set, 2 sets of warm up, and a control condition that is no warm up. And then for the one set, is just 75% of the 10 RM load, 3 to 4 reps, no more than that. Oh, but in my usual routine, I warm up with 6 reps. Okay, we understand. But as I said, we try it to
Yeah.
find a common ground on what people generally do. And that's the relevance, for example, for survey studies. Sometimes we see survey studies published and like, okay, it's just a questionnaire, like doesn't matter. But no, the surveys, it's part of science. It's part of the scientific rationale. So we have data from what people do in the as a practical approach, and now we can run a study on what is the most close what people do in the usual routine. And that's what he did in this study. So we have a one set protocol, 3 to 4 reps, 75% of 10 RMs, and a two set protocol, it's 55 and 75% of the 10 RM load. Again, 3 to 4 reps, and a control condition is no warm up at all. It's just the four working sets with the 10 RM load. And when we started the data collection, Brad, he always, of course, he's blinded, so he never saw the data collection. But he always asked me, what is your thoughts? Like, what is your expectancy? And I look at him and, hey, doc, probably gonna be no difference, which is crazy because when we designed the study, I was like, okay, two sets, 55, 75%, probably gonna be some advantage. The participants, they're gonna feel more prepared. So probably gonna be a better performance. But we started data collection. Okay, of course, we need to wait the study to finish, but well, it's pretty similar, everything.
Yeah.
So, and that's a surprising finding, especially for us, because again, even we try to reduce like risk of bias in research, of course, but the researcher that says, "Oh no, I never have my thoughts," he probably he's not saying 100% of truth, because when you start a study, you always think something like, "Oh, probably this group gonna like have more hypertrophy than other group," and that's why, for example, we write hypotheses, and of
Yeah.
course, we have like research practices to reduce this bias because it's an inherent bias of human. So, for example, ultrasound be blind, being blinded, and other testing of the study being blinded. So that's why we do blinding aspects in the studies to reduce this inherent bias. And but yes, surprisingly, after the protocols, okay, it was no difference. So that's crazy.
Yeah, and also caught me a little bit off guard because here in Mexico, prior to the publication of this study, there's been an ongoing controversy about warming up. Some people claiming that it's a must, that you are irresponsible if you're saying that you don't always need to warm up. And the other side of things where people are like, well, it's a waste of time, which I think it's always unhelpful, but at least gets the discussion going. At least I think I give them that. But we need to be careful because a couple things I wanted to ask you about the study design. And the first one, I think you already answered, but I'd like to make sure. Why did you guys selected particular the leg press and also the Smith machine for the bench press? Was it because that's what you had available, which is totally understandable, or
Mhm.
because it has a little bit more of ecological validity, like you mentioned, for people actually in the gyms doing the workouts?
Okay, so this meat bench is what we have, like is the is meat machine, but we have free weights, we have barbells, we
Okay.
have dumbbells, but we for especially for this protocol we need to make sure that the participants like they went all the way to failure, so it's for safety. So this meat
Yeah.
bench, you can just like rotate the bar and hack it. And the leg press, for example, why we use a leg press and not squats? Because when you are doing squats, sometimes your low back start to like, oh my god, maybe your legs they can do more work, but is your low back, like your chest, your breath, whatever, uh, start to like have some degree of fatigue. And in leg press, we try to like isolate this this factor, and that's why we use it, this mid bench and leg press for safety, because after some days of data collection, my voice was like, "Ugh," because we tried to like, let's go, one more, and after collecting like 10 10 participants in the whole day, your voice is gonna be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And first of all, for safety, and that's what we have in the lab.
Right, right, right. Because again, that's one of those things that one can only wonder, I wonder why they choose this exercise. And some people don't give you guys credit for that sort of decision making that has to be done and has to be done with the prior knowledge that there are gonna be some people that are not gonna be happy with it because of reasons. But anyway, the
Yeah.
other thing I wanted to ask you that I find really interesting and I think is worth mentioning is how do you decide what are the outcomes of interest? Because let's say for performance measurements, outcomes, well, you have an array of tools, you have an array of subjective scales. Why did you guys went with this particular ones? The physical performance one and also the psychological. I have them right here. I don't know how it's pronounced. I think it's Karolinska Sleep Scale,
Yes,
the
yes.
exercise readiness,
Hmm.
the reps in reserve, fatigue index, and I think the most obvious is the performance, reps and volume load. But
Hmm.
I give you the microphone. Why these specific measurements of outcome?
Okay, so just pretty quick, coming back to exercises and also leg presses, mid bench, they are compound exercises
Right.
because maybe we try to see it in piloting testing. And for example, if you are, maybe you don't, I wouldn't say that, but maybe you don't need warm up if you are doing like a single joint exercise, like a triceps push down, for example. Maybe you don't need. So we were like, okay, if there's an effect, probably this effect will be in compound exercises. And that's why we selected mid bench and leg press. And for example, not like leg extension machine and triceps push down, for example. Okay. But for the scales, one of the aspects we tried when we are designing the study. Oh my God, Adam is one of the dark side guys that
Dark
I was
side,
talking
yeah.
like. Yeah, he wrote like a really good word in Portuguese, but I won't pronounce it. Yeah, yeah. So Adam is one of the guys that I told you. My shootout to Adam, Alec, and my friends
I could
in
look
the
it up,
lab.
man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
No, no,
never.
don't do it.
Just because
Because
just because you
I
say
was
it,
talking
man.
with my friends, like, yeah, I only teach them good words in Portuguese.
Yeah.
All right. So coming back, um, one of the aspects that we are looking when we are designing the study, it was like, okay, we need to try because every decision in research is like we are trying. It's not perfect, but we are trying, and we try to put like more radical as possible. And sometimes you don't have like a physical performance enhancement, but you like feel better doing warm-ups. And it's a good question because half of our participants, something around I think 55% of our sample, they were not used to do specific warm-ups. And of course, we assumed that in the paper that we are not sure if the previous experience with the specific warm-up protocols would be a confounding factor. We put that in the limitations of the paper, but some participants, they are used to do specific warm-up in their usual routine outside the study. And then, for example, me, if I'm doing like a squat, a big tree, for example, an SBD, I need warm up sets. I need warm up sets, but it's my personal bias. You know, I am not saying that, oh, no, it's science based decision. No, it's my personal bias. I prefer to do warm up sets when I need to do my big tree exercise. I prefer. And that's why we assessed the perceptual scales because maybe sometimes some participants they don't get like any difference in performance aspects, but they are feeling better. So, for example, let's say, oh, our data is showing that okay, there's no difference in the performance, but the participants that they did like after they did the two set protocol of the warm ups they started to feel better. They, or maybe the RPE for the working sets reduced a little bit, you know. And that's why we decided to use the perceptual scales, because sometimes some of them, they're just like, okay, my performance is the same, but as I need my specific warm-up set, I'm feeling better. I feel better, like I have more enjoyment with this session. I feel my exercise readiness better after I did my specific warm-up protocols. And it happened with like some participants in the control condition. Some participants, they were like, that's crazy, I would never do it in my usual training routine. I would never just go to my working set and crush it. I would never do it. And yeah, that's why we assume in the limitations, we are not sure if this specific warm-up background would be a confounding factor of our data. And that's why we assessed the perceptual scales, not only the performance variables.
I think if we look at it at face value, the results, we can go, oh, okay, so in this context, 10 RM, the Smith incline bench press and the leg press, so no warm-ups necessary. But I think if we dig a little bit deeper, well, for instance, I would assume that, let's say, I would feel a little more ready to perform after perhaps two sets than just one. And perhaps some people did, like you mentioned, because in a study, unless the people behind it actually say it, we look at results at a group level, not on a personal level, you know, and perhaps there are differences, I'm sorry, that are worth mentioning. And that also other things that come to mind, it's perhaps I would feel a little fatigue after two sets, not just ready, but two sets of warm-up, and that can actually impact performance. And also, which I think is one of the big factors, the psychological ones. How do people feel? Do they feel ready to perform? Do they feel unsafe? Do they feel, I don't know, motivated by the people yelling at them and telling them insults in Portuguese? I don't know, man. There's a lot of things that can come to mind. So that's what I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the results because these are group level. But can we talk a little bit more about an individual level? Did you see being with the people around, with the actual human beings doing the training, that even if it's not reflected at a group level, you actually saw differences from participant to participant?
To be honest, no. It was the same. Like all the participants, they were pretty fine. As I said, some participants that they have previous experience with specific warm up, they complain it in the control condition. They complain it. But again, in individual level, just a few participants that they had like previous experience. For the participants that they don't have previous experience, they also did say nothing. They didn't say nothing about like, oh, I usually like don't do specific warm ups, but doing two sets or one set of specific warm up, well, don't change nothing. So okay, it's the same. So I think talking about individual level, the only thing that I is worth to mention that I noticed is just some participants that they have previous experience go control condition and complain it a little bit like I would never do it again. I hate that.
Right.
And I have one participant specifically. He loves specific warm up sets, and he did like the control condition, and it was like his worst performance. But when I say worst performance, I'm saying the difference was like one rep, two reps, not like something crazy like, oh, for the one set and two set protocol, he did like 40 reps, but for the control, he did like 10 reps. No, it's not a huge difference. It's just for T specific participant because, again, it was his personal bias, you
Right.
know, and that's why I mentioned it, my personal bias. For example, I have a personal bias to for doing warm up sets, specific warm up sets, if I need to do a big tree exercise, you know. But it's just this specific participant in individual level. No, there's nothing. For my surprise, because I was expecting something completely different, everyone in the lab was expecting something different, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's why I find it fascinating. I would expect the same too. Like, well, at least warm-up set can get you psychologically ready to perform. I don't know, but doesn't seem to be the case. But do you think if we run this study for, let's say, in a really fictitious world for a whole year, do you think in a longitudinal level can we? I know it's only speculation. I know I'm completely
Mhm.
aware, but do you have a hunch that it could be different results? Because perhaps I think so, in the sense that I don't know, gives you a little bit more psychological security, to put it that way. I don't know, something perhaps.
Yeah, and funny fact, in the discussion and the results of the paper, we run a regression to see if like the stronger participants they have something different from the weaker participants, because some people can argue like, oh, if you run this study with really strong participants, I'm pretty sure they will need warm-up sets because again, they squat with 500 kilos, 400 kilos, whatever. And Danielle, I would love to run a study with like powerlifters, for example, with eight weightlifting athletes. I would love to run a study with these guys. But again, when we talk about like very specific populations, they always, yeah, nah, I'm fine. I don't want to participate in the study. Um, so it's pretty hard to say like if in the longitudinal basis we will see something different. It's pretty hard to say. Even speculative, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like I don't think even in hypothetical way we will see something like beneficial of doing warm up sets. But again, maybe I can be wrong. Of course, I can be wrong. We need someone to run this study. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if someone gonna run to the study. Maybe. But for example, I was talking with Alec and Adam when we finished the data collection, and a good follow up for this study will be something around 6 weeks, uh, even for like strength and power, just to see. You don't need like 16-week study or 20 weeks. To see if the strength and power, even the readiness for the training, maybe can change. So it's not a hard study to run, but it depends on the exercises you are using as a to see, for example, maybe if you run a study again with triceps push down, could be a totally different result if you run a study with squats, with deadlifts. So, yeah, it depends on the exercise, it depends on the population, and it depends on what are gonna be the outcomes that you are assessing. So, but yeah, I can't say something in the longitudinal basis, even speculative. I don't know.
yeah, totally. I'm
maybe
glad
maybe
to,
our curiosity gonna keep going and okay, let's run this study.
and I hope you do, man, because you're doing great work. And I'm glad
Thank you
to
so
mention it.
much.
No, no, thanks to you, man, and to all your team. And it was eluding me. That's the most common argument that I've heard about the results and how we cannot extrapolate to stronger individuals. Well, who knows, man? Because I have a couple papers here that actually measure squat, bench with stronger people, and some tend to find benefits in terms of velocity loss and things like this, and some others don't. So it's easy, I think, to fall into this snapshot fallacy, let's put it that way, or into this trap that thinking, oh, but this only applies when you're talking about more moderate loads in people that are perhaps not so strong. Well, who
Mhm.
knows, man? But when you
Yeah.
talk with people, let's say powerlifting coaches that have been coaching for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, perhaps they're going to be a little bit more reluctant to not warm up in the way that they do. And that can bring its own set of problems. But when you publish these sort of findings, Alison, how do you brace yourself? How do you prepare yourself, man? Because that's some of the things that I found the most interesting about all these topics, to discuss them, to be open about them, to yourself as a researcher and also as a practitioner, not fall into any camps because, like you mentioned, we all have our biases.
Yeah, we are humans. We are humans, even like doing research or just in the field of the gym. Bro, you are human, you have your inherent bias, and we always need to fight against ourselves every day because, for example, for the 52 set paper, when we finish the study, analyze the data, whatever, all the process, and we look, okay, maybe I didn't, because when I designed the study, I was like, okay, maybe I gonna see the like the pill for all the solutions in hypertrophy. And also I was younger, so I was like, okay, maybe you don't you when you get like more maturity, you have a better balance between your own expectancy in the study. And I was like, okay. And then after all the process, and then the 52 set paper was published, I was like, okay, maybe I need to focus on other stuff. Like I need to run other studies and forget this, and that's it. But also, every time on social media, someone reminds me about the 52 set paper, and I'm glad because it was really hard work for my master thesis. And of course, as you mentioned it, all the studies I never did like alone. I have a team with me, and also I help my friends as much as I can. And but yeah, it's a pretty hard exercise to like. Okay, I have, for example, I have the warm up study here, like no differences. But okay, am I going to stop to doing my specific warm up sets of my big three exercises? No. Even like as a lead author of the study, like I prefer, I prefer, but I'm not. I will never go to social media and say like, no, this study. Sorry guys, I am the lead author of the study, but this study is a waste of time. Warming up is a waste of time. You don't need. I'll never do it. I'll never do it. But for someone that like time constraints, like, oh, I need to reduce like 10 minutes of the training session because as a researcher, as a powerlifting coach, I also have my fitness clients, and we deal with like a lot of barriers to exercise. So everything in exercise, I would never say is a waste of time. For example, if you are doing whatever you want, like one set, 52 sets, whatever, at least you are doing something. You are
Yeah.
exercising, and that's the most important thing. I think people sometimes ask me like, oh, in your opinion, what is the best variable for hypertrophy? And I always mention consistency. And that's the most important variable in my opinion. You can do low volume, high volume, length and partials, short and partials, whatever you want to do, but you need to do it consistently. You need to do it. So especially like with warm ups, if my fitness client, oh, I need to reduce 10 minutes, 15 minutes of my session, I'll say, okay, um, I'm gonna cut a little bit of your warm up sets. Let's do just working sets. For example, in this exercise, in a triceps push down exercise, in a biceps curl. And then my client goes to me, oh, I don't know, I'm feeling kind of weird not doing warm up sets in this exercise. And then I was like, okay, let's go back with the warm up sets into the exercise and try to cut the warm up sets in the other exercise. And then, as a coach, you always gonna try to find a balance with your client to, keep your client happy with the training program. Then that's the most important thing because we need consistency.
And I love that last bit because I think this is all a big lesson in humility. Um, because we want to be right about stuff, we want to be right about warm-ups, about volume, about don't get me started on the length and partial stuff. We want to be right, right? We want to be perceived as right in social media if we're coaches, if we're teachers, whatever. I know it's not your case because how you present yourself, but you know, there's tendency influencers and all this sort of stuff that they need to be right to sell a product, to sell themselves, to sell
Yeah,
an image.
yeah.
And like you mentioned, if somebody needs to cut a little bit their time off a warm up, it's perfectly fine. But if
Yeah,
they do move, if they do something that perhaps it's not in line with the latest research, it's totally fine. Who cares? Because they're moving, they're
totally fine.
exercising. And not
Mhm.
to lose sight
Yeah.
of that, man, I find that honestly poetic and also beautiful.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I need my coffee. That's why I start to like being so
Man, I loved
poetic
it, man.
here.
Loved it, man. Just to almost finish off and be respectful of your time, Alison, because you're in the science side of things, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned it before, but we have nowadays this open science movement. In your experience, what do you think needs to upgrade in the science field, in the science process, in doing science? And what advice, the second question to finish off, would you give to people consuming science? What, in your opinion, needs to be better in the science field, and how we as consumers can be better informed?
I think we in and I'm saying we, it includes you because you are like a science-based guy. So we as a whole, not only we researchers, because sometimes some researchers, even academia, even on Instagram, we put like, oh yeah, we have a PhD, we are doctors, we are, yeah, the guys that run the study. Who cares, you know? In the end of the day, your fitness client, like, they don't care for it. They just want to be happy with a good training program and consistent, and that's it. But I think, in my opinion, we need to respect the scientific process a little bit more, you know? Science is not like so sexy. It's not it's always a hard thing to do. It's pretty like it's a hard process. It's a slow process, you know, to do the things properly, to respect the scientific progress of the field, you know. And we have the open science movement, and I'm totally agree with that. I think is a good way to progress our field. But some people, they use this open science stuff to like, oh yeah, we publish first because the peer review process takes a while. Again, we need to respect a little bit more the scientific process. And I'm not saying the peer review process is perfect. No, I'm not saying that. But some people use the open science, not in the, in my opinion, of course, this is my personal opinion. Some people use the open science movement to like, yeah, we are the best guys because we do open science. And you guys, yeah, you guys are not the good guys because you guys are not doing the whole open science process. And I think it's a cultural process, but also I think if you use the open science movement, like for example, Dr. Schoenfeld and his students, of course, they use the open science process in the correct way, you know, in my personal opinion, and not for like, oh yeah, we publish it first, we are machines, we are like, oh, we did that first. So, and we did that first, we did that open science, and we are better than everyone else. You know, some
Yeah,
people, they use this open science movement like this, again, for like, yeah, we are doing open science, and that's why we are better because we do open science. Open science is a great process, but again, I think is one part of the scientific process. As I told you, in the next years, I'm very, very excited for the next studies that they are coming. Because if we look to our own research before start to criticize all other people just because they do open science or not, or any aspect of science process, uh, if we look for ourselves and what can I improve my research, what can I improve my studies, what can I do better as a human, as a researcher, as a coach, I think if every person in science-based fitness, especially in exercise science, do it, we will have like such a good field in some years. And for people that consume exercise science content on social media, careful, careful, because not only because a PhD or a guy with 1 million of followers, they are posting something, they are criticizing something. Uh, for example, here in Brazil, we have a lot of people complaining about like warm-up sets, complaining about like high volume studies or high volume content, and sometimes hypertrophy is such a small process, such a slow process. As I told you, it doesn't matter sometimes what you are doing. At least you are moving, you are consistent. Like you have the whole hypertrophy aspects covered. Like yeah, I'm training consistently. My nutrition is adequate for that. My sleep is good, and even if we don't have like strong evidence about sleep and hypertrophy, but I know Dr. De Souza, he's cooking. So yeah, so I think for people consuming exercise, science, fitness content on social media, we need to be careful. We need to read. We need to dive in the papers, read the papers. If you don't understand something, reach out the authors. You know, like send an email or go to Instagram DM and send a message like, "Hey, can you explain me a little bit?" I think I'm talking about myself, but I love when people reach out to me on Instagram. Hey, I didn't understand the this, and I love to help these people to understand better research. And one paper. Quoting Dr. De Souza, one paper doesn't have the power to change the status of something in the field. So it's not just because one paper, one preprint, whatever was published yesterday. Okay, now we need to do 52 sets. No, we don't need to do warm ups anymore. No, again, um, when we talk about evidence based, we need to respect a little bit more the triad on like the individual, the science, and the practical per se. You know, we need to respect the scientific process as a whole. And yeah, that's my one thing that I always think about it with people on social media. They need to be careful on what they are consuming, what they are looking for some claims, what they are posting on social media, and how strong are these claims, because strong claims need like strong evidence. And but it's hard for people, like they are just scrolling on Instagram and saw 1 million guy followers guy posting like yeah, 52 set is the way. And it's pretty hard for these people, or at least most of the audience, go to the research, read the paper, take a step back, think about it, reach out the authors. Hey, what is your thoughts on that? What is your, because if someone reach out to me like, hey, what is your thoughts like on 52 sets? Do I need to do 52 sets for my whole life? I would say no, you don't need to do 52 sets. And yeah, that's my advice for people on social media. Just be careful and be curious about the topic.
The infamous 52 sets of lengthened partials with no warm-up. That's what the kids are doing
ED
these
my
days.
study. ED my study.
Yeah. So yeah, because of that's why I'm really, well, honestly surprised that when I reach out to you guys, you actually accept, you take an hour of your time, which I deeply, deeply value. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I'm deeply grateful for you, Alison, for taking the time. It was well, I enjoyed every minute of our discussion. I hope it was a little bit interesting for
Yeah,
you
I
too.
I love it, our resenha. If you wanna, bro, we can stay here for hours
I'd love to,
because I
man.
love to have this kind of resenha about exercise science and our
As soon,
work outside
man.
our research cave. Like Adam wrote here, like gotta go get back to my research cave. We always make joke about it, like yeah, we are here in our research cave, And yeah, we love to go outside to this research cave sometimes to talk about our work. So I'm really grateful for you because, as I said, it means a lot for me. I have been following your work for a while, and then when you invited me, I was like, oh my God, am I a social media guy now?
Oh man,
So
don't
thank
mention
you
that.
so much for that, Daniel. Thank you
No,
so
not
much
at
for
all.
that.
Not at
Yeah,
all, man. Thanks to you. It's really my pleasure. And I hope we can have you one day here in Mexico, or perhaps I can go
for
there, but
sure.
I don't know. It will be
Yeah,
so good to hear from
when you
you.
visit like Curitiba in Brazil, just text me. Let's have a resenha, a coffee,
Oh man,
and
much
I
appreciated.
would love to show you our lab here. And
Oh, I'd love
just
that,
let me
man.
know, bro. Just let me know.
Sure, man. And anytime you're in Mexico, here you have your home.
All
So anyway,
right, all
Alison,
right. I'm gonna remember that.
of course, man, of course, you have my number, man. Please
Yeah,
do.
I'd love to visit
So
Mexico, bro.
I hope you have a great rest of the day, Alison. Well, no more else to add. Thanks to you again. It was a big pleasure, man.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. See you.
Take care,
Bye
my
bye,
man.
bro.